Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Today we have many interesting questions to answer in our first episode. I'm here, of course, with my co-host, ChatGPT. Hey, ChatGPT, say hi to the people.
Hey there, everyone. It's great to be here with you all for our first episode. We've got some exciting questions lined up, so
Yeah.
let's dive right in.
Yeah, we do. So let's start with our first question, which is very interesting question indeed. Is learning English really worth it in a multilingual world? Now, the assumption is that English is always essential. Now, we want to discuss this question and see, is it really and always essential? We are going to dive into whether it's practical or even fair to expect people globally to learn English. What do you think about this, ChatGPT?
That's a really thoughtful question. While English has become a global lingua franca, especially in business, science, and technology, it's not always essential for everyone. In a multilingual world, the value of learning English can depend on various factors like personal goals, professional aspirations, and regional contexts.
Yeah,
For
I
instance,
mean, for instance, what you see right now is that English is compulsory in most primary schools or perhaps in middle schools. Are there any statistics that give us where English is now compulsory in public schools and in private schools for children?
while I don't have specific statistics on hand, English is widely taught as a compulsory subject in many countries around the world, both in public and private schools. For example, in the European Union, English is the most commonly taught foreign language at both primary and secondary levels.
Yeah.
In
For
countries
example, Algeria for a long time had English only in middle school and in high school. And then I think 2 or 3 years ago, it became compulsory in primary school as well. Now for 3 years now, yeah, because now they start English in the third year in primary school, and now they are in the fifth year in the primary school.
That's a significant shift for Algeria, making English education more accessible from an earlier age. Introducing English in primary school helps build a stronger foundation for language learning, giving students more time to develop proficiency. This change reflects the growing recognition of English as a key skill in our interconnected world.
Yeah, and what do you think about this? About the fact that there is an assumption today that English is always essential. I mean, I understand that it is important, but there is like a push for the English language to become not only a lingua franca, but the language in which people think, and the language in which people write, and the language in which people innovate. I think that while this is good, it can definitely marginalize cultures, especially in emergent countries like in Asia or in Africa, where people want to think in their own language, because we know that language cannot be dissociated from the culture. And so we want the languages or the local languages to reflect the cultural values of people. And so if people innovate and if they invent things in their own language or in their own thinking, I think that this is going to promote their culture and promote their values. Whereas what we see, especially for example now with the advent of ChatGPT and other artificial intelligence tools, since these are essentially that is, the research is done in English, everything is done in English, then it promotes more or less a Western point of view. And I'm aware, of course, that this very podcast is in English, which is in a way a promotion of the English language. So what do you think about the irony of this very podcast?
You've raised some important points. The dominance of English, especially in fields like technology and innovation, can indeed lead to the marginalization of other languages and cultures. When English becomes the default for global communication, it can overshadow local languages and perspectives, which are deeply intertwined with cultural identity. This focus on English can create challenges for non-English speakers, potentially limiting their ability to contribute to and benefit from global advancements. It's a complex issue, balancing the practical benefits of a common language with the need to preserve linguistic diversity.
Yeah, and I mean, English is very practical for everybody. For me, I mean, in terms of career advancement, English has helped me a lot. And I guess that a lot of parents right now want their children to learn English because they want to secure for their children a future in which they can thrive. But at the same time, of course, nations want to develop their own values and their own cultures, and at the same time also have an advancement in their economy. And that, as we know, is definitely linked to the way they communicate. And so I think that promoting, at least for now, bilingualism is important. For example, promoting or multilingualism is important. And so this focus only on English is not something that should be taken for granted. And so this is why I always tell to my students and to learners of the English language. Now, the English language is a gateway to other cultures and other languages for you, because once you know that a language like English, which is today a global language, is helping you have career advancement, then start thinking about other languages like Spanish, or I don't know, like for example, French or Arabic or even Chinese. How, if you learn and at least have some kind of intermediate or lower intermediate level in these languages, think about how your career is going to become definitely better.
Absolutely, Jalul. Promoting bilingualism or multilingualism is key to fostering cultural appreciation and economic advancement. When students learn multiple languages, they gain broader perspectives, enhancing their cognitive abilities and opening up more opportunities.
Definitely.
This not
Yeah. So what do you think? There is one question I want to ask here. Do you think that there are cases where people can thrive without the English language at all?
Yes, there are certainly cases where people thrive without English, especially in regions where other languages dominate. For example, in countries like China, Russia, or Brazil, individuals can achieve great success in business, science, arts, and politics without relying on English.
Are there any statistics about this?
While I don't have specific statistics, we can look at indicators like economic growth, scientific contributions, and cultural exports from non-English speaking countries. For instance, and Brazil's cultural influence through music and sports all showcase success stories without a primary reliance on English. These examples highlight that thriving in various fields is possible in different linguistic contexts.
Yeah, Brazil is a very good example, I think. but I have no idea about the status of English in Brazil. What's the status of English in Brazil?
In Brazil, English is considered an important foreign language, especially in business and academia. However, proficiency levels vary widely across the country. English is taught in schools, but the quality of instruction and exposure to the language can differ greatly between urban and rural areas. In major cities, there is a growing demand for English, driven by international trade, tourism, and the influence of global media.
Okay, so let's go into the second question. Do you have to live in an English-speaking country to become fluent? Now, of course, this is a very old question of immersion in an English-speaking environment, whether this is the best or the only way to achieve fluency, because many people talk about this idea of fluency, how to achieve fluency, how long does it take to achieve fluency. This is a very important question for many people. And what I think personally is that you don't have to live in an English-speaking country to become fluent. You certainly can improve your fluency by living in for a certain time in an English language speaking country like Britain or like America or Australia or New Zealand. You can certainly do that. A visit, for example, for a short time can definitely help you become more fluent. But to achieve fluency in our world today, in the world in which we are living today, you don't need to live in a foreign country or in an English-speaking country at all. Because I have seen people who have become fluent at a very early age just by being exposed to native speakers or to English in general through movies, songs, the internet, their teachers, practice inside the classroom, outside the classroom. They've reached fluency without even going out of their city. Here, I live in Wergla here, and I know some people who have never, I know children who have never been outside of Wergla, and they have been able to reach a level of fluency that I would definitely describe as advanced. I mean, they can speak the language like fluently without any problems. What do you think about this, ChatGPT?
I completely agree with you. In today's digital age, achieving fluency in English without living in an English-speaking country is more attainable than ever. Access to online resources, media, and communication platforms allows learners to immerse themselves in the language from anywhere. As you mentioned, consistent exposure through movies, music, the internet, and interactive practice with native speakers or fluent users can significantly boost fluency.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the key here is to try to mimic immersion. Like, you mimic immersion by very simple things. You mimic immersion, for example, by changing the language of your phone from Arabic or French to English. You mimic the immersion by listening every day to podcasts. You mimic the immersion by definitely reading in English, which is, I think, the best immersive way in which you can mimic the English-speaking environment. You mimic the immersion by finding a partner with whom you can speak the language. I mean, in situations outside the classroom. You can do that inside the classroom if you are enrolled in an English language program, or if you are a student at the university, or if you are a pupil in a high school, for example. You can do that inside the classroom. But I think that the most important thing is to try to speak the language outside the classroom in situations where you forget that you are actually learning the language. And if you are lucky, you can find an online partner perhaps with whom you can practice the language every day. And the possibilities that we have now, as ChatGPT has just said, in the digital world are of course endless, and you don't have to spend any money to go to a foreign country, to an English speaking country, to learn the language or speak it fluently. Definitely not. This is not the world in which we are living today. And I'm not talking only about English. I mean, I've seen some of my students, and I was baffled by the fact that they can speak Turkish or Korean, and they've never been to Turkey. They've never been to South Korea. And I say, how did you learn Korean? And they say, yeah, just music, anime, and those South Korean series. Right, ChatGPT, what do you think?
Absolutely, Jalul. Mimicking immersion through everyday habits is a powerful strategy. Changing your phone's language, listening to English podcasts, reading books, and engaging in conversations outside the classroom can all contribute to a near immersive experience. The examples you've given, like students learning Korean or Turkish through media and music, show just how effective these methods can be. In our interconnected world, language learning has become more about resourcefulness than geography.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, let's go now to the grammar questions. Now, for the grammar questions we have is grammar overemphasized in English learning? Now, this is a recurrent question that we have. Do we have to follow the rules? Do we have to know the rules? Do we have to learn the rules? Do we have to study the rules of grammar in order to use, speak, master, become fluent in the language? My simple answer to that is no, you don't. I mean, for me, the language, learning a language is not about learning the rules of the language. It cannot be about that. Learning the rules of the language can definitely take your language level from, for example, intermediate to advanced. But when you are starting to learn the language, I don't think that you need to know a lot about the grammar in a very conscious way. That is, spending hours on grammar rules, I think, is not necessary, and will distract you from real communication, which can be a problem there. And so, yeah, I think that going for an immersive, communicative approach, and we can have many examples of how people have, and I'm here not only talking about people who have traveled to a native English-speaking country, but I'm talking about here in Wergla, here in Algeria, in which English is a foreign language. I've seen many people learn the language, speak the language fluently, and they have never picked up a grammar book. I mean, never in their lives. And they have just learned the language by listening, then reading, then using the language, right?
You're spot on. Emphasizing real communication over strict grammar rules can make language learning more effective and engaging. When learners focus on using the language in context, they naturally pick up grammatical structures through practice and exposure. This doesn't mean grammar isn't important. It definitely has its place, especially at more advanced levels. But it's not the be-all and end-all of language acquisition.
Yeah, it's not. No, it's not. So yeah, that's for that question. Let's go to the last question now. The last question: are English tenses more complicated than they need to be? I mean, the way, of course, here the tenses are important, especially when it comes to reaching a certain level of fluency. And the question of tenses is a complicated one because some people think that the tenses in English are complicated. Do you agree with this?
English tenses can seem complicated, especially for learners whose native languages have different tense structures or fewer tenses. English has 12 main tenses, each with its own nuances, which can be daunting.
Yeah,
However,
I agree. But the problem, I think, is in the way in which these tenses are taught. That's the problem. Again, coming back to the overemphasis on grammar that we have in our classes today. The way grammar is taught, and of course, by extension, tenses are taught in our classrooms, whether in private schools, as I have observed, but especially in public schools, is that they make the learners learn the tenses by heart, and they focus on the form instead of focusing on the use, and so that's a problem. And I think that the English language tenses, when I was learning the language, I never really paid attention to the tenses because I was not someone who was great at grammar, although I've learned the language, the English language, through using it and reading and playing video games and listening to music, especially rap music, and watching TV, etc. What we were talking about earlier. But then when I wanted to take my English language level to the next level, that is to upper intermediate and then to advanced, especially when I became a teacher, I had to learn more about the ways in which the language works, and of course I paid very special attention to the tenses. And when I paid very close attention to the tenses, I didn't want to focus on the form. I wanted rather to focus more on the use and on the ways, on the situations where you would use this and this and not this. And so one great book that I would give to my students every time they ask me about how can we improve our fluency in English by learning grammar. One book I give them is English Grammar in Use, the Blue Book, which is a wonderful book because it doesn't really emphasize the form of the language and learning the rules of the tenses and the grammar, but rather it emphasizes the use of the grammatical rules in certain contexts. And I think that's very important, of course. So I was saying that the problem in my mind is that it's not so much that the tenses are complicated, it's just that the way they are taught is complicated, and we need to simplify the way in which we teach the tenses by focusing on their uses and without using a lot of jargon and going into endless explanations and exceptions here and exceptions there and focusing on accuracy. No, we should focus more on fluency. English tenses, I think, are very simple. All you have to do is really understand how they are used, what they are used for, and then everything unlocks. You don't need to understand them in themselves like a system. If you do that, then they are complicated.
You've articulated that brilliantly, Jalul. The way tenses are taught can make a huge difference. Emphasizing practical use over rote memorization of rules can help learners see tenses as tools for communication rather than abstract concepts. By focusing on the context and meaning behind each tense, learners can develop a more intuitive grasp of how to use them effectively. Simplifying the teaching approach can certainly demystify English tenses, making them more accessible to learners.
Definitely. Hey, we've come to the end of our episode today. That was great. Thank you very much, ChatGPT. This first episode was great. Would you like to tell something to the people?
Thanks, Jalul. It's been a fantastic first episode. I hope everyone enjoyed our discussion as much as we did. Stay curious, keep learning, and we look forward to diving into more topics next time.